frozen command post in the heart of winter, knowing that somewhere beyond the snowy forests a storm of destruction is gathering. While everyone around you sees peace and optimism, you see the shadows forming, the pieces aligning, the enemy preparing for one final desperate strike. Now imagine having just 7 days to prepare for what would become the largest and bloodiest battle American forces would fight in the entire Second World War. This isn't fantasy. This is exactly what happened to General George Patton and his remarkable intelligence officer in the final months of 1944. When they somehow predicted the unpredictable and prepared for the Battle of the Bulge before anyone else even knew it was coming. The secret they possessed wasn't supernatural, it wasn't luck, and it wasn't some classified technology. It was something far more powerful, something that changed the course of history and saved thousands of American lives. Stay with me until the very end, because what you're about to discover will change the way you think about leadership, preparation, and the thin line between victory and catastrophic defeat. Before we dive into this incredible story, I need your help. We're aiming for 100 comments on this video to keep bringing you more fascinating World War II stories like this one. So please, as you watch, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, or simply tell me what part of the story grabs you the most. Your engagement means everything, and I personally read and respond to every single comment. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and watch until the very end, because the most shocking revelation comes in the final minutes. December 1944. The war in Europe seemed all but won. American, British, and Allied forces had liberated France, pushed deep into Belgium, and were closing in on Germany itself. The mood at Supreme Headquarters was optimistic, almost celebratory. Generals were already planning their final offensive, the push that would bring them to Frankfurt and beyond, straight into the heart of the German Reich. Christmas was coming, and with it, perhaps, the end of the bloodiest war in human history. Victory felt inevitable, just weeks away. Soldiers wrote letters home promising they'd be back soon. Commanders relaxed their vigilance. After all, Germany was on its knees, wasn't it? The enemy was finished, defeated, incapable of mounting any serious threat. Intelligence reports from most Allied headquarters confirmed this rosy picture. Germany was done. The war was essentially over. But in a modest command post, one man saw something entirely different. While other commanders were planning victory parades, Colonel Oscar Koch, the intelligence chief of General George Patton's Third Army, was studying maps with growing alarm. Koch was no ordinary intelligence officer. Born in Milwaukee in 1897, he had started his military career as a private in the Wisconsin National Guard, serving in the Pancho Villa expedition and then in the First World War. He had worked his way up through sheer competence and an almost obsessive attention to detail. When Patton needed an intelligence officer for his armored divisions in North Africa, Koch was the natural choice. The two men formed an unlikely partnership. Patton, the flamboyant, profane, ivory-handled pistol-wearing general who believed in reincarnation and wrote poetry. Koch, the quiet, methodical, detail-oriented analyst who trusted numbers and patterns more than hunches. Yet they understood each other perfectly. Patton once declared that Koch was the best intelligence officer in any United States command, and he meant every word. In late November 1944, Koch noticed something disturbing. German units were disappearing from his front. Radio intercepts that had been constant suddenly went silent. Aerial reconnaissance photographs showed unusual rail movements in the Eifel region, just across the border. Prisoner interrogations revealed mentions of SS units being transferred westward. Ammunition dumps were appearing in suspicious locations. Fuel depots were being stockpiled behind German lines in areas that should have been quiet. To most analysts, these signs meant nothing. Germany was simply regrouping for defense, they said. The enemy was repositioning to protect the fatherland from the inevitable Allied invasion. Nothing to worry about. But Koch saw something else entirely. He saw a pattern. He saw preparation. He saw the signature of an army getting ready not to defend, but to attack. Koch employed what he called an all-source intelligence approach, a revolutionary method that would later become standard in military intelligence training. He didn't rely on just one type of information. He combined aerial reconnaissance with radio intercepts, prisoner interrogations with civilian reports, captured documents with photo analysis. He looked at logistics, at supply chains, at the movement of specialized units. He studied German military doctrine and psychological patterns. He asked himself not just what the enemy was doing, but why they were doing it, and what it revealed about their intentions. Most importantly, Koch understood something fundamental about intelligence work that his peers often missed. The purpose of intelligence wasn't just to collect information, it was to protect the commander from surprise and to assist in accomplishing the mission. Intelligence officers who simply reported facts without analysis were useless. Koch's job was to interpret, to predict, to warn. By early December, the picture became clearer and more alarming. Koch estimated that 13 German divisions, possibly more, were massing in the Ardennes region. These weren't just any divisions. They included 5 panzer divisions and 6 paratroop units, elite forces representing some of Germany's last strategic reserves. The Ardennes, that densely forested, rugged region where the borders of Germany, Belgium and Luxembourg met, was precisely where the American lines were thinnest. The Beta Corps, stretched across this sector, was undermanned and overextended. If the Germans attacked there, they could punch through, perhaps reach the Meuse River, maybe even drive all the way to Antwerp and split the Allied armies in half. It was a desperate gamble, but for a desperate regime facing total defeat, it made perfect sense. Hitler would throw everything into one last offensive, hoping to force the Western Allies to negotiate, to buy time, to deploy his wonder weapons, to achieve something, anything, other than unconditional surrender. On December 9, 1944, 1 week before the German attack, Koch requested a special briefing with General Patton. This wasn't routine. The mood in the room was tense. Koch laid out his analysis with characteristic precision. He showed the maps, explained the intelligence indicators, detailed the enemy's probable strength and composition. Then he said something that made everyone in the room fall silent. The Germans were capable of launching a major counter-offensive in the Ardennes, possibly within days. If they did, the enemy would have the advantage in that terrain and weather. The attack would come north of Third Army's position, threatening Patton's flank and the entire Allied strategy. Patton listened carefully. Unlike other commanders who dismissed pessimistic intelligence as defeatism or overcaution, Patton trusted Koch completely. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and brutal honesty. Koch never told Patton what he wanted to hear. He told Patton what Patton needed to know, and Patton valued that more than flattery or false optimism. After Koch finished, Patton stood up. His response was characteristically direct and decisive. "We'll be in a position to meet whatever happens," he declared. The Third Army would continue planning its offensive toward Frankfurt, but Patton ordered his staff to also prepare contingency plans for a rapid shift northward. If the Germans attacked where Koch predicted, Patton wanted to be ready to counterattack immediately. Not in weeks, not in days, immediately. This decision, made on December 9th, would prove to be one of the most important command decisions of the entire war. While Patton's staff worked on the contingency plans, Koch continued monitoring the situation. The signs became more ominous. On December 16th, Koch reported at the morning briefing that German radio silence suggested an attack was imminent, probably at Luxembourg. That same day, at 5:30 in the morning, the prediction became reality. Along an 80-mile front in the Ardennes, German artillery erupted in a massive barrage. 200,000 German troops and nearly 1,000 tanks burst from the forest, smashing into the surprised and thinly spread American positions. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. The German offensive achieved complete tactical surprise. American units were overrun, communications were cut, chaos spread through the front lines. At Supreme Headquarters, the shock was profound. General Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, was caught completely off guard. So was General Omar Bradley, who commanded the 12th Army Group. Their intelligence staffs had assured them Germany was incapable of offensive operations. Yet here was a massive German army, attacking with ferocity and coordination, threatening to unhinge the entire Allied position in the West. Panic began to set in at headquarters. The Germans were advancing rapidly. Key road junctions were threatened. The crucial town of Bastogne, where 7 roads converged, was about to be surrounded. If Bastogne fell, the German panzers would have clear routes to the Meuse River and beyond. But at 3rd Army headquarters, there was no panic. Patton had been expecting this for a week. When Bradley called on December 18th to explain the situation, Patton was ready with answers. When Eisenhower summoned his top generals to a crisis meeting in Verdun on December 19th, Patton arrived with a plan already in motion. The meeting in Verdun has become legendary. Eisenhower, shaken but trying to project confidence, told his generals that the German offensive should be seen as an opportunity, not a disaster. Patton immediately grasped what Eisenhower meant. The Germans had come out from behind their fortifications. They were exposed, their supply lines stretched, their armor vulnerable to counterattack. This was a chance to destroy them in the open, rather than having to dig them out of prepared defenses. Eisenhower asked Patton how quickly he could disengage from his current offensive and attack northward to relieve the pressure. The room fell silent, waiting for Patton's answer. Every general there understood the magnitude of what was being asked. Turning an entire army, reorienting hundreds of thousands of men and thousands of vehicles, changing the axis of advance by 90 degrees, doing all of this in the middle of winter, in terrible weather, while maintaining combat effectiveness, this was considered virtually impossible. Most commanders would have asked for 2 weeks, maybe 3, to accomplish such a maneuver. Patton's answer stunned everyone in the room. "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours, he said calmly. 2 days. The other generals stared at him in disbelief. Bradley thought Patton was being reckless again, making impossible promises. Eisenhower was skeptical, but desperate enough to hope Patton could deliver. What none of them knew was that Patton had already ordered his staff to prepare exactly this contingency. While other headquarters were still trying to understand what was happening, Patton's 3rd Army was already pivoting northward. The plans Koch's intelligence work had prompted were being executed. The 4th Armored Division, the 80th Infantry Division, and the 26th Infantry Division were already receiving movement orders. Supply lines were being reorganized. Maps were being printed, fuel and ammunition were being repositioned. Everything was in motion. What Patton accomplished in the next 3 days remains one of the most remarkable feats of military logistics in history. He reoriented 3 full divisions, more than 60,000 men, along with their tanks, artillery, trucks and supplies, turned them 90 degrees, and sent them racing north through snow and ice to hit the southern flank of the German offensive. The staff worked around the clock. Officers who thought they knew the limits of what was possible discovered those limits could be shattered by will and preparation. Radio operators coordinated movements across hundreds of square miles. Truck drivers navigated icy roads in blackout conditions. Infantry soldiers, exhausted from weeks of combat in Lorraine, climbed into trucks and bounced north toward a new battlefield they knew nothing about, except that Americans were dying there and needed help. On December 22nd, exactly when Patton had promised, his forces attacked. The 4th Armored Division, spearheading the thrust, smashed into the German southern flank near Bastogne. The Germans, who had been entirely focused on the Americans trapped inside the town, suddenly found themselves fighting a fresh, aggressive force from an unexpected direction. Patton's attack disrupted German plans, forced them to divert units to meet the new threat, and relieved pressure on other sectors of the Bulge. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division and attached units were holding desperately against repeated German assaults. They were surrounded low on ammunition, running out of medical supplies, enduring constant artillery bombardment. When the German commander sent a surrender demand, the American commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, sent back a one-word reply that would become famous: nuts. The weather, which had been overcast and snowy, preventing Allied air support, began to clear on December 23rd. Patton, ever the showman but also a man of genuine if unorthodox faith, had ordered his chaplain to compose a prayer for good weather. Whether divine intervention or meteorological coincidence, the skies cleared. Allied fighter bombers swarmed over the battlefield, hitting German columns, destroying supply trucks, strafing tanks. The combination of air power and Patton's ground offensive began to turn the tide. On December 26th, elements of the 4th Armored Division broke through to Bastogne, ending the siege. The corridor was narrow and constantly under German fire, but it was open. Supplies and reinforcements could flow in. The wounded could be evacuated. The German offensive, which had driven 50 miles into Allied lines, creating the bulge that gave the battle its name, had reached its high water mark. The fighting would continue through January, brutal and costly, as Allied forces gradually compressed the bulge and pushed the Germans back to their start lines. The weather was miserable, the terrain difficult, the enemy fighting with desperate courage. American casualties were staggering, over 80,000 men killed, wounded, or missing, including more than 10,000 dead. It was the largest and bloodiest battle American forces fought in the entire Second World War. But the German losses were even worse, and unlike the Americans, Germany could not replace them. The Battle of the Bulge destroyed Germany's last mobile reserves, wrecked what remained of the Luftwaffe when it tried to support the offensive, and consumed irreplaceable fuel and ammunition. After the Bulge, German defeat was not just inevitable, but imminent. General Patton emerged from the battle with his reputation enhanced rather than tarnished. While other commanders had been surprised and forced to react, Patton had anticipated and prepared. While others scrambled to understand what was happening, Patton executed. His rapid relief of Bastogne became legendary. Soldiers who fought under him in that brutal winter spoke of his leadership with admiration. He visited frontline units constantly, driving through snow and enemy fire, his famous pistols on his hip, his voice harsh but encouraging, pushing his men forward but also sharing their hardships. He demanded the impossible and somehow inspired them to achieve it. Yet Patton, for all his ego and love of glory, gave credit where it was due. He knew that without Oscar Koch's intelligence work, without that crucial week of warning, the Third Army could not have responded so quickly. Koch's prediction had given them time. Not much time, just 7 days. But in war, 7 days can mean the difference between disaster and triumph. What was Koch's secret? How did he see what other intelligence officers missed? The answer lies in his methodology and his relationship with Patton. Koch understood that intelligence work required more than just collecting information. It required interpretation, synthesis, and the courage to make unpopular predictions. Many intelligence officers fell into the trap of telling commanders what they wanted to hear. If the commander wanted optimism, they provided optimistic reports. If the commander wanted pessimism, they found reasons to worry. Koch refused to play that game. He reported what the evidence indicated, regardless of whether it was convenient or welcome. And Patton not only tolerated this independence, he demanded it. Their relationship worked because both men understood that false optimism could get soldiers killed. that unpleasant truths were better than comforting lies, and that preparation based on accurate intelligence was the foundation of victory. Koch's all-source intelligence approach was revolutionary for its time and is now standard practice. He taught that no single source of information could be fully trusted. Aerial reconnaissance could be deceived. Radio intercepts could be faked. Prisoners could lie. Civilians could be mistaken. But when you combined all these sources, cross-referenced them, looked for patterns and anomalies, a clearer picture emerged. Koch also understood the importance of studying enemy doctrine and psychology. He asked himself what he would do if he were the German commander facing the same strategic situation. Germany was losing the war. Defensive strategies would only delay the inevitable. Therefore, an offensive, however desperate, made strategic sense. The Ardennes offered the best terrain for such an offensive because it was where the Allies were weakest. The logic was inexorable once you understood the German perspective. Perhaps most importantly, Koch understood timing. He didn't just predict that the Germans might attack someday somewhere. He identified when and where with enough precision that Patton could prepare specific responses. The briefing on December 9th, exactly 1 week before the attack, gave Third Army just enough time to create contingency plans without disrupting ongoing operations. This timing was crucial. If Koch had warned too early, the plans might have been forgotten or dismissed as the boy who cried wolf. If he had warned too late, there would have been no time to prepare. 7 days was the sweet spot, and Koch's sense of timing was impeccable. The Battle of the Bulge also revealed the limitations of other intelligence systems. Supreme Headquarters relied heavily on Ultra, the secret program that decoded German encrypted communications. Ultra was extraordinarily valuable throughout the war, providing insights into German plans and dispositions. But for the Battle of the Bulge, Ultra failed. The Germans maintained strict radio silence before the offensive, knowing the Allies could intercept their communications. Hitler personally ordered that the attack plans be shared only on a need-to-know basis, with written orders delivered by hand rather than transmitted by radio. The result was that Ultra, for once, provided no warning. Intelligence officers who had become dependent on Ultra were blind to what was coming. Koch, who used Ultra but didn't rely on it exclusively, saw the attack coming through other indicators. After the war, Koch's contribution to victory at the Battle of the Bulge was recognized by military intelligence professionals, though it took time for the full story to emerge. Koch himself was modest about his role, preferring to credit Patton and the soldiers who did the actual fighting. But military historians who studied the battle came to understand that Koch's intelligence work was a model of what good intelligence should be: timely, accurate, actionable, and unbiased. The United States Army's Intelligence School eventually adopted Koch's methods as the foundation of their training. His emphasis on all-source intelligence, on protecting the commander from surprise, on having the courage to make unpopular predictions, became doctrinal. Koch was inducted into the Military Intelligence Hall of Fame in 1993, recognition that came posthumously since he had died in 1970. Facilities at Fort Huachuca, the home of Army intelligence training, were named in his honor. The relationship between Patton and Koch also became a model for how commanders and intelligence officers should work together. Commanders must trust their intelligence officers enough to listen to unwelcome news. Intelligence officers must be independent enough to report what they see rather than what they think the commander wants to hear. This mutual respect and honest communication can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Patton trusted Koch, even when Koch's assessments were grim. Koch respected Patton enough to know that the general could handle the truth and would act on it decisively. This partnership, forged in North Africa, and perfected through campaigns in Sicily, France, and Germany, reached its apex at the Battle of the Bulge. What makes this story even more remarkable is that Koch's prediction was available to other commands. The intelligence indicators he used, the aerial photographs, the prisoner interrogations, the radio silence, all of this information was also accessible to First Army intelligence, to Supreme Headquarters intelligence, to other G2 sections throughout the European theatre. The raw data was there. What made the difference was the analysis and the willingness to make an uncomfortable prediction. Other intelligence officers saw the same evidence and dismissed it. They convinced themselves that Germany was too weak, too defeated, too rational to attempt an offensive in winter through the Ardennes. They fell victim to mirror imaging, assuming the enemy would think and act as they would. They underestimated German desperation and Hitler's willingness to gamble everything on one last throw of the dice. Koch avoided these analytical traps by maintaining objectivity and by always asking what the enemy might do, rather than what Koch hoped the enemy would do. The Battle of the Bulge could have been a catastrophic defeat for the Allies. If the Germans had broken through to the Meuse River and captured Antwerp, the Allied supply situation would have become desperate. The war might have been prolonged by months, perhaps even leading to a stalemate and negotiated settlement that would have left Hitler in power. The casualties would have been far higher, the political consequences unthinkable. But because of Koch's intelligence work and Patton's decisive leadership, the German offensive was contained and turned into a German disaster. The Allies recovered from their initial surprise, rallied their forces, and not only stopped the enemy advance, but destroyed Germany's last mobile reserves. After the Bulge, the path to final victory was clear. The Rhine would be crossed. Germany would be invaded. The war would end in total Allied victory. In the decades since the war, the story of Patton and Koch at the Battle of the Bulge has been studied by military professionals around the world. It's taught at staff colleges as an example of intelligence done right. It's analyzed in doctrinal publications on operational art and military decision-making. It's cited in debates about the role of intelligence in modern warfare. The lessons remain relevant because the fundamentals haven't changed. Technology has advanced enormously. We have satellites and drones and computer analysis that Koch could never have imagined, but the core principles he demonstrated still apply. Intelligence work requires synthesizing multiple sources, maintaining objectivity, understanding enemy psychology, having the courage to make uncomfortable predictions, and building trust with commanders. These human elements of intelligence work are timeless. The secret that Patton used to predict the future wasn't a secret at all. It was simply excellent intelligence work, done by a brilliant analyst, supported by a commander wise enough to listen. Koch didn't have supernatural powers. He had training, experience, attention to detail, intellectual honesty, and the moral courage to warn of danger, even when others dismissed his concerns. Patton didn't have mystical intuition. He had the wisdom to hire the best intelligence officer he could find, and the discipline to trust Koch's assessments, even when they contradicted his own aggressive instincts. Together, they formed a partnership that saved thousands of American lives and changed the course of the war's final months. When the weather cleared and Patton's forces smashed into the German southern flank, when the siege of Bastogne was broken and the Bulge began to contract, when German soldiers started surrendering in droves because they knew the war was lost, all of this flowed from that briefing on December 9, 1944, when Oskar Koch stood before his commander and said the thing no one else was willing to say. The Germans are coming. They're coming soon, and they're coming in force. The Battle of the Bulge remains a testament to American resilience, to the courage of ordinary soldiers fighting in terrible conditions, to the importance of leadership at every level. But it's also a testament to the power of good intelligence work and the difference one clear-eyed analyst can make when supported by a commander who values truth over comfort. In a war filled with dramatic battles and heroic stands, the quiet work of an intelligence officer studying maps and reports in a headquarters miles behind the front lines might seem mundane. But Koch's work was as crucial to victory as any rifle company's assault or any tank battalion's charge. His prediction gave the Third Army the gift of time, just 7 precious days. But those 7 days were enough. In war, as in life, preparation and foresight often make the difference between success and failure. Oscar Koch and George Patton understood this truth, lived it, and demonstrated its value on the frozen battlefields of the Ardennes in that brutal winter of 1944. And if you want, tell me from which part of the world you're watching this video. Your comment matters, and I want to read it and reply. For more exciting stories like this one, click on the video appearing on your screen right now.